We've got a really good set of speakers tonight to talk to us about trees. But first, I want to tell you about some other things that are coming up. We have our spring cleanup, the 18th and 19th. So you can drop off your materials to go to waste at the Public Works building. But also there is a street cleanup. We're going to do Upper Mountain Road and clean up all the trash along the side of the road. On the 18th, starting at 10 a.m., just meet up at the Public Works building, and we're going to work down Upper Mountain Road. Okay. Next one, there is a tree planting for Earth Day. This is at East Valley Park. It's being sponsored by Bucks Beautiful and the Bucks County Parks and Recreation Department. So we'll be out there planting trees in East Valley Park to try to create more forests there. And finally, we have our annual pollinator and plant sale coming up in May 16th. So look forward to that. We have a nice collection of native perennials to put in your garden to attract butterflies and help pollinators, and everything we use or everything we're selling this year is deer resistant. All right, so
I know,
So our first speaker tonight is Kayla. She is a Pennsylvania forester, and she's going to tell us about planting and caring for trees. Kayla.
I am not Orshi. She couldn't be here tonight, but she gave me her presentation, and I kind of cut it a little shorter because it was like 80 slides. Orshi's fantastic, but she likes to talk. So my name's Kayla Karras. I am a service and urban forester for DCNR Bureau of Forestry in the William Penn Forest District. So that's the district that everyone here lives in. The William Penn Forest District covers 9 counties here in the southeast, so Northampton, Lehigh, Berks, Lancaster, everything to the Delaware. I cover Lehigh, Montgomery, Philadelphia, and Chester counties for service work, not bucks, but I do these presentations. And I cover all 9 of our counties for urban-related things. Orshi is my counterpart in the urban and community forestry section. She is much more urban. I just kind of do general urban things. She's much more focused than I am. So I'm filling in for her tonight, and I apologize for my speaking. We did some controlled burns yesterday. I ate a lot of smoke, and my throat is dry and a mess. So I sound a little hoarse, and I'll probably be drinking quite a bit. So, okay. So I always like to kind of start some presentations with just some general overview of Pennsylvania and our forest districts, and not many people are aware of like how big Pennsylvania is in terms of our forests. So we have about 17 million forested acres, and the forest types that you're going to find are northern hardwood, which you'll find in the northern tier predominantly, oak hickory, which is down here quite a bit, and you got your Great Lakes, and then mesophytic is just kind of more wetland areas. So Pennsylvania brings in about $20 billion worth of wood products and employs about 60,000 people, so it's a huge part of Pennsylvania, especially in the northern tier. And then our state forest system, which includes state parks. So I'm Bureau of Forestry, and then there's the Bureau of State Parks. We're 2 separate bureaus within the state. So you're probably more familiar with Nockamixon or Fort Washington or Tyler. Those are state parks. You're in the William Penn Forest District, which is on 9 counties. We have about 3,400 acres of state forest at the moment. Not a lot. If you go up into the northern districts like Tioga, Loyalsock, Susquehanna, they have hundreds of thousands of acres. They're open to the public. It's hundreds of thousands of acres of woods that you can just go and do whatever you want on within our rules and regulations. 70% of Pennsylvania, the forest is privately owned, so that's a lot. So part of my job as a service forester is to help educate landowners on how to properly manage their forests if they're interested in it, because 70% of having 17 million acres forested is a lot, and we want to make sure that that's being stewarded properly for, because there's loggers, foresters out there that maybe not all have good intentions or aren't trained properly. So we want to make sure that landowners in Pennsylvania are aware that like we are a free service. So me covering my counties, anybody can call me, and if they have wooded acres or even small lots, because I kind of fill that in between gap, I come to you as a free service to help educate you on your property. I have your service forester for Bucks County listed at the end. So if anybody's interested, you can take her information, and she's gonna love me for that. So this is kind of just a general overview of what service foresters do. I always like to just, I said, add this stuff in here because not many people are aware that we exist in more of these like suburban areas. So this is most of the things that I do as a service forester. I kind of have to know how to do everything and do most of it at least decently. So landowner visits, that's the big part of my job for my counties. Sustainable forest management, cost share assistance, not so much in these southeast counties. Information on consultants, planning, advice on forestry, water related best management practices, insects and disease. Invasive species is a huge issue here in the southeast. I deal with that quite a bit, especially on our own state forest properties. Presentations like this one for schools, EACs, pretty much anybody who wants a forester to come and speak. And then part of my job as an urban forester, I help with township ordinances, not as much as Orshi does. I can just kind of give like a general view. She can help write them. Tree City USA, that's coming up. I approve all of our southeast, so the most counties and the most townships in the state. I also have the most counties I cover in the state. I do the short straw on that. I have the most out of any forester. Don't know how. We do lawn to meadow conversion, technical assistance, or forest conversion, open space technical assistance. So if townships have open space properties that they're not sure what to do with, it's something I do as well. Tree planting and maintenance, riparian buffers, grant reviews, and technical assistance on grants. I put buffers in there twice, but it's important, so I guess it gets there twice. Okay, so what we're gonna kind of give an overview of tonight is the benefits of trees, buying, planting, mulching, pruning, harmful conditions, how we can remediate those if you planted something years ago or you moved into a home that had bad planting, and then some DCNR resources that we have, and a program that's going to be coming up here in May. So benefits of trees, they're pretty important. Monetary value, yes, in your yard, not so much of a monetary value, except for maybe, raising your, property value. But the issue that we deal with in urban settings is the life expectancy of suburban trees is pretty low. The 93%, that's from a study done in the 90s. It's about the same, if not maybe slightly better, which is good, but not much. The trees are planted and cared for improperly. So if you have proper care, you get increased lifespan and benefits, and also reduce risks of the trees damaging your property later on. So the benefits of trees, it's quite a bit. So the most important, I think they're all important, but biodiversity is huge. Insects, flora, fauna, all of that comes together. Reduced rates of cardiac disease, strokes, and asthma due to improved air quality. Cooling, so you have trees next to your house in the summer, it's going to keep your house a lot more cool. It keeps the sun off your home, helps pull up moisture out of your yard if you have a wet yard and you plant the appropriate species. Filtering air, so especially in busy cities and streets, helps filter your air out and helps reduce air pollution around you. It helps with reducing what we call urban heat sinks, so especially in like big cities like Philadelphia, with all the reflecting off the concrete and the windows, it creates really, really hot areas, and you plant trees in there with the transpiration. It helps reduce the heat sink of the sun setting into the city. Managing stormwater, keeping our streams clean, filtering out pollutants and sediment that run down off of our heavy rains and off of streets and pulling that debris into the water. Increasing property values and just reducing stress. If anybody's if you're all here, you definitely care about the environment and the trees, and just being outside and away from like busy areas and being out with nature does calm you down. It's a whole new thing now, so it's becoming much more popular and more common, and people just going out and just kind of sitting in the woods. I enjoy it, so probably why I have my job. What else? You tend to be more physically active too if you have trees or beautiful streets to walk or parks close by too. And that's a big initiative in the southeast, is trying to connect parks and different townships together by trails. So a big thing when you're first starting out on your planting and redoing your yard adventure or parks or anything that you're involved in is planning for the future. So in DCNR and in general, we like to say right tree, right place. You don't want to plant an oak tree that's going to grow 100 feet tall directly into your power lines, and you get those nice U-shaped trees that are just so beautiful. You really want to make a informed decision on the tree that you want to plant out front and what's going to be there, not just now, but what's going to be there in the future. So you want, adapted to soil and microclimate changes. That's a huge topic right now, climate change. So thinking about tree species that are on the line of a southern species, we also call it assisted migration. So, planting things that are going to tolerate hotter weather in the future, because, not the trees are going to outlive us. So if you're planting an oak, it matures at like 100 years old. We're not going to be around to see that. But the next generation is. So we want to make sure that we're planting the appropriate species that are going to still be able to handle those climate changes in the future. So durable and long-lasting trees, size and maturity, height, width, their rooting tendencies. Are they a very shallow rooter that like to, pop up out of your yard or push pavement up? And also diversity. And a big thing that we're dealing with, and it'll be later in the talk too, is having a diverse range of tree species in your yard and along the streets prevents disease and insects from spreading through that much quickly. So we saw it with the emerald ash borer and all the ash trees, and ash are a beautiful tree and they line the streets with them, and then they all die and you don't have a tree left. So planting a huge range of tree species and sizes and flowering, it really helps with birds, with insects, and just overall beauty and health of your street trees or any yard trees that you have. You want to look, long-term outlook. What's the street going to look like in 20, 30, 50 years? We can't really predict that, but I think, and we've all seen it as you're driving and farms are kind of disintegrating and being sold, and more housing developments and things are coming up, and old buildings are getting torn down and putting apartment buildings up. It's things to think about. Like, is that 100-foot tree still going to be there, or would a tree that's only going to grow 20 or 30 feet tall at maturity, is that going to be able to last there longer because it's not towering over something else? Also, new invasive diseases and insects, we can't really predict that, but we can try to pick species that are kind of more hardy than others. Oak have a lot of issues at the moment. I think the only tree species that we really have, at least in a forest setting, that are doing really well are tulip, poplar, and hickory. So the problem with both of those is tulip grows really, really fast and really tall and isn't the hardiest tree, and hickory grows incredibly slow. And then, weather and temperature, which goes back to the climate change. So the next thing, you've kind of figured out what trees you want to plant. So what kind of stock do you want to go with when you're picking trees or shrubs for your yard? So you have bare root, containerized, and ball and burlap. So bare root advantages: they're inexpensive, the roots are generally healthy, and they're super lightweight. I mean, you can get little seedlings or you can get really tall whips that are bare root. I think a lot of the trees that the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society gets, and some of the bare root tree plantings that go on, are like 8 to 10 foot trees, bare root. And I mean, we unload them off the trucks. They're in a bag with gel around them to keep the roots wet, and they're super light. Anybody can just take them and put them in the ground. Drawbacks: limited planting time and limited selection. So you have to get them in the ground really quick, because you do not want those roots to dry out. And the disadvantage there is you have to plant within days, or just make sure that they're in some sort of gel or water, and even putting in a temporary planting situation so you can get them into a permanent setting. Containerized are much easier to secure any time of the year. But the issue is more expensive, but they also become pot bound or root bound. So if anybody's bought a tree in a container and it's been in there too long and you pull it out, I have some pictures, just this giant tangled mess of roots. That can cause issues if you don't get those roots taken care of. They can circle around and it just becomes a problem when you plant. And also they're full of potting mix, circling roots. It's hard to find the root flare, which is where the roots start to bow out. That's where you want to plant. So they can be difficult, but they're usually the most available and it's the most common that you're going to get. And then ball and burlap, they're your really large trees. Most townships tend to buy ball and burlap because they're already that much more established. They tend to grow a little quicker. They're easier for people to see. If you have tree tubes or trees this big, nobody's going to really notice if there's a tree in there. But if you're already planting an 8 or 10 foot tree, it's much more noticeable to the public. Much more expensive. They are super heavy. You usually have to have a bunch of people or some sort of machinery to move them around. You do get a lot of root loss because they use big machines to just dig them out. And then you have to cut the basket off, you have to find the root flare, you have to remove all the burlap and ties. There's some contention with burlap. I've had quite a few landscaping companies say they leave the burlap on because it's biodegradable, but it's the same issue. You're going to get root bound with it and they're going to get girdling of roots and you're going to have a problem. So those are the 3 stock that you're going to be looking at if you're looking to plant, and then the drawbacks and some of the things that are good about each. So you're gonna pick if you want your bare root, your containerized, and your ball and burlap, but then you got to look at the tree or the shrub itself. So if you're looking for the tree, you're going to want a straight trunk with no codominant leaders, and then branches less than 2/3 of the main branch. So what's that saying? It's a lot of information. So if you look at the tree that says desirable, it's nice and straight. It has even branches coming out. None of the branches are, too heavy on one side or the other. It's grown really well. And if you look on the tree on the right, not desirable, you can see about, a quarter of the way up, you've got a bunch of branches, a bunch of leaders, as we call, coming out. I think you're probably most familiar with it, if you can picture it, is all the Bradford pear that are now blooming. They all have multiple leaders, and they're a very weak structured tree because of all of that. You want a tree that has one main leader on it, even branching throughout. And then the desirable on the left, and you've got those branches coming out at a nice 45-degree angle, makes everything much more strong, versus on the right, when you have a codominant or multiple leader, those cracks where the bark is, where that splits, as the tree bends and flexes, it creates micro cracks within that bark, lets moisture get in, you get rot in there, causes issues. So if you get a nice straight tree without all those leaders, usually much better off. There are some species, Zelkova does it a lot too, where they have multiple leaders. They can be pruned back into a single when they're young, but if you're getting a full-size tree or something bigger, you're definitely going to want to look at the form and the structure of that tree. As you're, looking, you also want to see, is that tree pretty solid? Is it kind of whipping around? Sometimes I've seen it in nurseries, they just pull them out of the ground and they just kind of, flop over. It's because they've been staked. They haven't been really let go to the elements, staked too tight. So you want solid trunk thickness. So the bottom of the trunk to the top, you don't want it to be really thin and top heavy. You want the tree to have grown appropriately, put on size where it needs it. So left desirable, has branches going all the way down. It wasn't pruned clear to the top. Looks like a healthy, sturdy tree. But then you see the trees on the right, they took the stakes off. They had it staked too tight. The tree didn't have time to grow and flex with the elements. So trees have tension wood and compression wood. And if you stake them really tight, like it's a telephone pole, it has no room to bend. As soon as you take those stakes and ties off, the tree's just going to fall over because that stake's been doing all the work for it as it's been growing. You want to plant a tree, stake it. You can have it tied, but have the ties loose. So as the wind blows, the tree can still move around, and that helps the tree from falling over when you take the stakes and ties off. So picture on the right, you just want branches all the way down. Those trees are planted far enough apart where they're gonna have branches. As the trees grow, they're gonna shed lower branches as they grow. Trees self-prune. They don't need those bottom branches. They're gonna get rid of them. Some trees are really bad at it. Pin oak's really bad at it. They have branches all the way down. They're super messy. Scarlet oak, same thing. White oak, not the best self-pruner. They can hang on to their dead branches for a while. But you just don't want the tree to have just that tiny little ball on top of it. You just want to make sure that, shows more vigor in the tree. And better that the nursery took care of it better and just didn't take off the first 75% of the branches. So proper planting. This is the most important part, because if you don't plant a tree appropriately, then the life of your tree is really going to go down. So you want to expose the root flare. The first thing you do when you pull it out of the pot, you got to find where that root flare is. And the root flare, if you can see on, I don't have a pointer, but I'll just go up here, is right where the main part. So you'll have the taper of the tree come down. That root flare is where you can see that the tree's really starting to spread out. Sometimes it can be a little more difficult depending on the species, but you can pull all that dirt away and you can find where the roots really come out. You don't have to worry about the roots drying out in 10 minutes as you're messing around with the tree. You really want to make sure that you're planting it at the appropriate level. And also you want to make sure you're planting it the depth of the root. So if you've got roots this deep, you're going to want to you dig a hole that deep, because the last thing we want also is what we call J-rooting, where you put the tree down in, the hole's way too shallow and the roots go up like this. That's going to promote the roots from growing up and in and also girdling around the tree. So that's a really big issue as well, is making sure that you're planting the length of the roots, digging that hole. If you've got a root that's coming out 3 feet on one side but not on the other, you're going to want to kind of dig that hole for the way the roots are shaped and how deep they are when you take it out of the container, or if it's a bare root. So you kind of got to play with it. It's not just dig a small hole and throw it in the ground. You want to really make sure that those roots are spread out and you're not promoting the roots from circling back around on the tree or growing up and out of the soil or around. If you ever walk the streets, you'll see roots coming up and out and around, and kind of it's like they're strangling themselves over time. So planting that appropriately. The hole wider but only as deep as the roots. You want to remove the burlap, the wire basket, and the potting soil and the potting mix. Not a lot of people do that, but the potting soil, when it dries out, it sucks up the moisture and it can hold it for a long time. And that can promote root rot over time if there's too much moisture. The problem with the potting soil, and I'm sure you've got it if you bought flowers or anything, it's bone dry and you're just dumping water in it, and then it gets too wet and doesn't drain out, or the inverse of that, or the water just pours right out the bottom and it's not taking it up. It depends on what potting soil you get. You just want to remove that and have real dirt. In a flower setting, or if you're keeping the tree in a pot for a while until you can plant it, that's fine. But when you're putting it in the ground, get as much of that off as you can. So the root flare level with the ground, you want to spread the roots out, and you want to backfill it firmly. So as you're doing it, put a layer in, tamp it down, not hard, but press it down with your hand or your foot, throw your weight on it, do a little more. You want to make sure that those roots are stabilized. If you just throw it in and then just stomp on it when all that soil's going to settle, and that tree has a potential to sink down more, or you'll see a big divot. And then the tree won't have as much structure as it needs. So filling it slowly, tamping it all down, filling a little more in. Don't just shovel it all in and then do a dance on top of it and call it good. Do it in layers to make sure that soil gets in and under and around those roots. And mulching, it's mulching season, so I'm sure you've all seen it. It was like washing it the whole day as I drove in, is the volcano mulch. Don't do that. So you want 2 to 3 inches of mulch around the tree. So we call it the 3-3-3. So 3 feet around the tree, 3 inches deep, and then a 3-inch donut around the tree that has nothing. You do not want mulch around the base of that tree, because then you're going to promote adventitious root growth in a spot where the roots shouldn't be growing. So all those mulching volcanoes that you see, that tree is going to be triggered into this is all soil, or this is all here. I need to put more roots out. further up the tree, and we don't want that. We want all the root growth below the root flare. We don't want it growing up the tree. Also, having that mulch against the tree like that is holding moisture against the trunk, and you're promoting rot at that point because all of that moisture is along there. We want the root flare slightly exposed, open. The water can like run down the trees, it does its thing, and then get filtered out through. We don't want that mulch tight up against there. And then stake if needed. And you can see in this example with the stakes, they're far apart, but then there's slack in the ties. We don't want them tied tight on either side so that tree can't move. We want a little bit of slack in them so as the wind blows, the tree can do its thing and figure out where it needs that tension and compression wood at to make sure it holds itself upright. So here's a mulching examples. We got that beautiful volcano mulch, or we've got the volcano mulch with my favorite, the trenching around it. So you've got that nice ring. But if you're volcano mulching, you're promoting root growth high up on that tree, and those roots are going to be closer to the surface. So if you go around and trench that, and you can barely see it in that picture, there's little white pieces coming out, you're cutting those roots off. And then the correct way to mulch is away from the trunk, low and wide, and then preferably like loose and organic mulch. The dyed mulch, maybe not the best. But if you're gonna use it, that's fine. Just make sure that you have it mulched appropriately and away from the tree. So here's a couple other examples. Planted too deep, you see how those stakes are also super tight and wrapped around that tree? As that tree grows too, those ties, if they're not removed immediately, and I've seen quite a few where, you know, people forget and it's there and oh, it'll be fine. And next thing you know, like the bark is growing around that. It's cutting off the vascular system of the tree, the xylem and phloem. That's going to girdle the tree and kill it. And then the picture on the left, you can see those white, those are adventitious roots. Those are roots that are growing out above the root flare that shouldn't be there because it was mulched or planted too deep. So we don't want that. We want to make sure that we're planting at the root flare level and not mulching too high. And you can, I guess, solar sheath. I don't know what's coming up sometimes.
Can you fix that, like the adventitious roots, can you cut those
Yeah,
back?
yeah,
and
we're
then
gonna-
just- Okay.
Yep. So this is what I was talking about, like a bound root system within a container. And I'm sure at least some of you here, if not all of you, have seen this if you bought any sort of potted plant. We don't want that. So you can break all of that apart. You don't have to be afraid to really dig in. And when I get, you know, potted plants like that, I'll like cut it in quarters and try to spread it out and shake all that out. You don't have to really worry. I mean, that's a ton of roots. When we get bare root trees, they're, you know, roots 2 or 3 inches and they're maybe this long. Like trees will grow back. It'll be fine. Unless, you know, cutting them clean off. But having something like that has more than enough roots. So cutting those off and really shaking them and getting all of that potting soil off. And then what you want to do is you want to go in and find the roots that are spinning around. And if you can see on the top left, there's like a line going like horizontal across the top. Those are roots that have started to grow around. We don't want that. So here's a good example on the right. Those roots were in a plant was in a container, was in there for a really long time, and you can see those, they started twisting and growing around each other. That's just gonna kill the tree in 10 to 15 years. I get calls all the time, especially from developments and retirement homes or 55 and plus communities that had planted trees or had trees planted when the community was built, and it's 15 years later and they're like, all of our trees are dying. I don't know why. Can you come help? Because they have arborists there, and the arborists are the landscaping companies. I mean, they call them because to them it's landscaping. And they're like, oh no, it's, you know, we'll just take it out and put a new one in. It's almost kind of like a business for them to do that maybe. And like, I would say 90% of the time it's just they were planted and they weren't planted right. J-rooted or planted too deep. Or the biggest one is they just had girdling roots. And if you peel all that soil back, or even you can even see it on the top, there's roots this big just wrapped around the bottom of the tree. So if you plant right, your trees have a much higher rate of survival. There's always other factors that come into play, any diseases and stuff, but just site prep and making sure your tree's in the ground right is just going to save you so much time on the back end. So planting before, you can see on the left, the roots that have just grown in circles, they can be cut at a slower rate. That tree's probably done. But on the right, you can see that how they're supposed to be out, like kind of the spokes of a wheel. We want tree roots to come out just like a wagon wheel. We don't want that in a big circle. Just some side effects, the rot specifically, that's, mulching too high, planting too deep, girdling roots. And then you can see, especially on the right, that tree was planted way too deep. And you can see that piece on the bottom, that's a giant root that has grown up and around the tree. Another example of leaving the burlap on. So that's the ties of the burlap and the wire basket. The tree was just put in the ground. I see this in developments quite a bit too, where, you dig out around all the mulch they've piled on for years, and I see burlap and wire. So that tree, it's might as well just cut it down. There's no point in having it there anymore.
There's nothing you can do to save that tree?
At that point, because if it still has the wire on it, then it's grown all around. I mean, you could come in and like companies like Bartlett and stuff do it where they're like air spade and they open all of that up and they can go in and cut it out. But then you got to look at your cost of having them come in and do it versus just planting a new tree. I mean, it can, especially if it's a really large tree and you find that, like a lot of times it's just easier to remove it and just plant a new tree. So there's always like a cost, analysis that has to be done, especially in a large community, an HOA or anything like that, which I've dealt with. I have an HOA that has, I would say, probably 80 trees that were planted inappropriately. They also have needle cast and some other diseases, but they're weakened because of the poor planting practices. It's introduced other diseases. So pruning, you want to prune with a purpose, we call it. So I'm going to kind of run through this quick because this is getting into it, but just something to look at if you have things you want to prune. You want to do it in like the winter. You don't want to do it now while things are starting to green up. So what to cut? If you have, we'll start at number 1 at the top. That's another leader that we call coming out. It's less dominant. We want to get rid of that. We want to promote straight growth. Any branches that are kind of all goofy and malformed. So it's number 2 on the top left. Any branches that cross against each other are always rubbing against each other. We don't want that because that rubbing is going to make the bark come off. It's going to introduce disease into the tree. Water sprouts, those are the ones that just kind of shoot straight up out of nowhere, kind of goofy looking, the form of the rest of the tree. We don't want those. Branches growing at sharp or unnatural angles. So anything that's like super close to the tree that grows, sometimes I see branches, they almost come like straight up at an angle. Those are very weak structured. Anything that's broken or damaged, and lower branches over time as needed, as a tree gets bigger and you need to like do anything around it, just prune those back. And then anything that suckers around the base of the tree, those could be adventitious roots that as you pulled away some of the mulch, they then turn into branches. Trees kind of do what they need to do.
Prune them flush to the trunk, or do you?
No, we don't want to do that. Pruning cuts. Good segue. So we want to prune things properly. I'm sure people have seen if you flush to the tree and you've got this big open wound, we don't want that. So what we want to do, and I think she has arrows in here, we want to cut where the branch collar is. And that's kind of like an odd term, but you can see this swell here and at the top. That's the branch collar. And we want to prune above that because that's what's going to seal over the wound. Trees don't heal, they seal. So you can kind of remember that's called codic, compartmentalization of disease in trees. Trees seal over their wounds. So you can only imagine if you're cutting this flush against the tree, you're removing what's going to seal over that. So you're just going to have this big entry for disease and rot within the tree. So properly pruning it, you got the bark ridge That's this top, you can kind of see it, and then the branch collar is around it. So when you cut, especially with bigger branches, you always want to do what we call an undercut first. So you're going to cut further up a little bit and cut the bottom. Your second cut, if it's a bigger branch, for sure, you're going to cut that weight off because you don't want to have that bark peel down. And then your third cut is going to be right in front of that branch collar. And younger trees, that collar might not be as formed yet. So you kind of got to, like, without having the best examples, you can kind of feel where it is, where the bark's a lot more rough at the junction. But doing that first cut from the bottom is going to prevent the weight of what you cut from pulling and peeling the bark down the tree. So if you were just to cut just right here, and if you start at the top, you have the chance of that weight of that branch pulling down and peeling all this bark off, and we don't want that to happen. So doing an undercut first can help prevent that and get the weight off of it. So I'm sure this is what everybody's seen. So incorrect, you've got those big wounds. You can see on the picture on the left, you can see where it's peeled the bark. Cutting them in the wrong places, and then you've got the correct outside the branch collar, and it allows for faster sealing of the wound. So you can especially see it in the bottom right where the tree's starting to grow around that. I'm sure everybody sees this, especially in parks.
Question?
Yeah.
Pruning, do you just leave it open and let it heal itself? I mean, I heard some people put.
Yeah, you don't need to do any of that. The trees can take care of themselves on that. There's people who do it, but sometimes if you seal that, you can also be sealing in moisture, and that you don't want that either. So just letting it kind of do its thing, seal over it. You know, the moisture will dry when the sun comes out, but if you put any sort of coating over that, you can seal in fungus spores, anything like that, and cause more damage to the tree later on.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The last one of them was cut straight so that the opening was directly toward the sky.
Yeah.
I was told that would just allow moisture to get in and make it worse. Is that true?
Yeah, it can hold moisture if you cut it, if you're cutting it and, it just sits right there. The biggest thing is you want to cut parallel with the branch collar. So you can really see it more like.
So sometimes it's going to be like that.
Yeah, it could be if the branch collar is that big. The biggest thing is you want to cut right outside of that branch collar parallel to it. So this, we also see quite a bit, harmful conditions of a tree. I see this all the time too, pretty little rock mound and all that around it. Well, the tree's not planted all the way up there. It's planted where the grass is. That's where the root flare should be. So it's essentially a very pretty mulch volcano is what you've just done with that. So there's not enough space for the tree, not enough airflow. You've either got too much or too little water because that's a water trap for the tree. The soil gets really compacted and hard around all of that. Another one I see is weed fabric. People like to do that around the tree. You're just trapping moisture within that layer from, roots are only found within the first 12 to 24 inches of soil. Roots, the whole taproot thing, that's not, if you ever see a tree upturned, there's no big giant root that goes straight down in the ground. There is maybe when they first start to grow, but that taproot absorbs and the trees grow out. So that's what gives trees bend and flex. Telephone poles don't have that. They're nice and rigid. Trees move, and that's because their roots grow out. So, weed fabric can really compact and just trap moisture. Road salt, that's a big one. Herbicides, vines growing on the tree, especially down here in this area. This is something, I'm not going to read through it, but if anybody wants to take a picture of it, or she likes this one a lot, I do too. I think they have even stickers made of it and posters, all the different ways that people like to do that can kill the tree over time. A thing that I get all the time, especially in urban areas, the phone call I get maybe 4 or 5 times a month is, I have a black walnut in my yard and I heard that they go for a lot of money. How much money can I get for my tree? And I'm like, It's a yard tree. You're not, I mean, the people before you, like, they probably put the eyes on the tree or they hung a bird feeder to it and it's probably full of nails. Like, you know, one tree doesn't necessarily hold monetary value. Like, do you like that tree? Do you like it in your yard? Like, you know, or if you're, it's not worth any money. You know, the 24 ways to kill a tree, the birdhouse on there, that's a big one. The bird feeders, everything around it. So I kind of reference this in my calls that I always get about the one black walnut in their yard that they think's worth thousands of dollars. I thought I had the root clearing one in there. I must have taken off. So you can remedy the whole volcano mulching situation. You can do it on your own, but it's not just taking a shovel and digging. It's like using a hand trowel and digging out those roots very carefully, making sure not to damage them. And kind of exposing that root flare and mulching appropriately around it. The best way, if you have a large tree that has been volcano mulched, is probably call a landscaping service or somebody like Bartlett that can do what we call an air spade, which is they go in and they kind of blast all the dirt out from around it, and then they can backfill and get rid of any girdling roots or anything like that. If you have smaller trees as a landowner, it's much easier to do because they're much smaller. You have a large tree, you're gonna be doing a lot of work, and if you're not familiar of like properly, like, you know, identifying which roots should stay, which should go, it's always best to call a certified arborist for anything like that. But you can remediate those situations on your own by bringing the mulch back down, being aware of how you're mulching. And if you have, you know, any adventitious roots or anything that's growing, you can prune those back. You just don't want to make sure you like completely bare everything and shock the tree immediately. You want to do things a little bit slower over time. I mean, you can do it. I always tell landowners you're going to be there for a long time. Why don't you just like slowly bring it back year after year and take care of it that way. But it's always best to call a landscaping company that's reputable and or a certified arborist is your best bet to help you with any volcano mulching and things like that. I can tell you have the problems. I cannot fix them for you. As a state employee, I am an education and guidance kind of person. So getting actual work done, I'd always recommend a certified arborist do all of that work. So, or she has a slide, hire reputable professionals. This is a really good website. Everybody always asks me all the time. Treesaregood.org. That's a website that I give landowners quite a bit. I cover a huge area and there are thousands and thousands of tree services. And reliable sources of information. DCNR and Penn State Extension are great resources. Our DCNR website for the Bureau of Forestry has a ton of resources. ISA, any botanical gardens, Cornell, Virginia Tech, lots of good information. I'll give everybody a second if they want to take a picture.
But your point is that that's not happening from the grid.
Yeah, that's lines tailing. You see that quite a bit. It's just kind of an everything picture. They've got construction going on right around it. Did they take any precautions to, you know, are they running heavy equipment right over that, compacting the roots even more? You know, this is kind of like that perfect example of like everything that could go wrong is going wrong in that picture. This is DCNR or Orshi's side of DCNR, technical assistants and partners. So this is all the stuff that she does that's more specialized than me. I'm, like I said, kind of a generalist. I do a little bit of everything where she's much more specialized. And she's much more familiar with the grant program, C2P2, the Community Conservation Partnership Program is what townships generally apply for. I'm like the technical service. I go in and check the work. Or she's more in the details of the grant. She knows all the ins and outs of it. I just go and say, yeah, looks good or not. And then their community tree assistance program, which is a new one, that's also for townships, so. And then the new thing that they have, this is our invasive replacive program. So this is for the public. You can get free native plants. It's really cool. They did it last year. This year they added a lot more. So to participate, you gotta be a PA resident. You have to complete the registration. And you have to show proof that you've removed an invasive species from either your property or a property that you have permission to be on. So that's anything on the Pennsylvania invasive species list. So things like barberry, honeysuckle, euonymus, calorie pear, any of those species, Milominute, Japanese silkgrass, anything like that. Take a picture of a before and after of you removing it, and then you're eligible to get free plants. So you have to arrive in person, and the closest ones that are coming up are Harrisburg, Allentown, Darby, and Lancaster. So you fill out the form, and you have to arrive in person at the giveaway location on the appropriate date, and you have to have the ability to transport the plants at that time. So last year there was, people were showing up and they're like, I can't take these with me. Can I come back and get them? You got to be ready to go when you get there. And I think last year it was only 5 plants. I think you're eligible for more this time, and it's like a first come, first serve. So it's really cool.
So does this include plants that you inadvertently put in your own garden, like a chameleon plant or?
As long as it's on the Pennsylvania invasive list. Yeah, so you want to Google that. I think that might be, I don't know if agriculture has that list. Or you can just look up the invasive plants that they recognize within. So that's kind of how we're, because technically anything that you kind of plant could be invasive if it's spreading into your neighbor's yard. But if it's not a plant that's like has a chance of like escaping into the environment, there's plenty of things you plant that's going to stay there. Not so much. We want things that are going to get out. Japanese maple, especially Norway maple, things like that. Those are the things that they count that are going to really harm our ecosystem. And so this is that program. Or she's information, that's her email if anybody would like it. She's more of the urban. And then mine and my coworker Sarah. So Sarah is your Bucks County Service Forester. I like to put that picture. I got it. It's a turkey pole, in case nobody knows. Like a little turkey pole. And there's Sarah's information for Bucks County. So that was my presentation. So, questions?
Keeping our trampled dirt around the tree, how far should you keep things away from the tree itself? I mean,
So are you talking like stone mulch and things like that, or like
asphalt for one, and there's you talk about tree like the redwoods. People, it's pretty, and they walk a compact thing, but I'm talking about asphalt or sidewalk.
I mean, you see like trees in Philadelphia and street trees, like they're still in the smaller. It's just if they're planted property with like what they call there's like root guards that you can put in the pit that allow the roots to go out and around that. At any point, if you're planting a tree in a situation like next to a driveway, even like those roots on that side are going to get compacted over time because of the way, even in your yard, the roots get compacted because of your mower. The soil's much different. But you can still plant trees in those situations as long as you take the proper precautions of no girdling roots and making sure the root flare's there. I mean, trees can grow around quite a bit of stuff. So I've seen trees in really tiny pits, but they're healthy. They're planted. That it's more of like what's going on underground, especially with like the root guards that they have and things like that, where the roots can get out of that area and still have a chance to spread out. And it's not just a concrete pit. Then it's basically in a giant pot in the ground at that point. So, I mean, the bigger area, the better, is always going to be the best. But it's, trees in Philadelphia are in like a little 4x4 area or even 2x2 smaller than that. So it's really just making sure like the health of the tree, it's pruned properly, it's watered appropriately when it needs to be. Fertilizing, I'm like always on the fence about. Sometimes I don't really see the need. But it's more of just like the pre-site of what you're doing, making sure it's got good soil, planted appropriately, it's not sinking or frost heaving, things like that. So there's really no one shoe fits all. It's really like the site and everything that you're planting. But you can still have, trees and pits in Philadelphia are the prime example. You can still have healthy trees in an environment like that with all the asphalt around it. But you don't want the asphalt directly, or I've seen that where they put asphalt directly to the base of the tree. You don't want that. They built a trail and they just put the asphalt right around the tree and they kept on going. And why, I have no idea, but you don't want that. I mean, you know, you at least want the 3-3-3 rule is always the best. 3 feet in a circle that's a 6-foot diameter. So
Is it even possible to get rid of English ivy on a tree?
yeah, I mean, if you cut it, you know, I just don't cut it, leave it hang, but cut a gap in spots. But the issue is like, cut it off the tree, but you're gonna have to kill the root structure, and the only way to do that is either dig it out or use an herbicide, which is a touchy subject, I know, but if you do it in a way that's not drifting anywhere, I have landowners who will not do herbicide, but I tell them like, it's glyphosate. I know it's a touchy subject here and there, but if you take it and you get a syringe and you just drop it on that exposed where it's not blowing in the breeze and running around, and you'll still have transpiration, right? You want to do it as soon as you cut it, because that's still the ivy's still transpiring. It's still pulling water and everything. It hasn't quite figured out it's been cut yet. You want to have that glyphosate get sucked into the root system and kill the root structure. If you don't do that, that ivy's just going to resprout and keep right on going. You have to kill the root structure. So that's the biggest thing. Like, cut a big chunk out of it. Don't just cut it and leave it hang, because I mean, it can reconnect itself. I've seen it. And then as those vines die, you want to let them die and completely dry out. They'll start to disintegrate. I'd never just cut it and start pulling. That's dangerous, but they'll dry and shrivel and start to desiccate. And then over time, you can start to pull them down. But the biggest thing is you have to kill the root structure. They're just going to keep on growing. It's especially hard in people who have yards that's now a mat of ivy. That's almost like you're digging, you know, a couple feet of soil out and starting over, or you're doing broadcast herbicide sprays. There's really no in between. You can try putting cardboard down, tarping it for a really long time, but they just grow underground and pop up somewhere else. So it's a tough one. Pachysandra is another one that's a pain as a ground cover. Any of the vines are terrible for trees. I mean, even native poison ivy can be bad if you see it. Like, I've seen huge where you think it's the branches of the tree and it's not, it's poison ivy branching out. So.
Is the BCNR doing any, do they have any outreach plans to work to educate with landscapers who do the volcano mulch? I mean, that's a big business around
It
here.
is. We're more in like the conservation of like natural resources as a whole for the state. So that's where it comes like into my like kind of purview. But that's more educating landowners to be able to tell their landscaping companies, hey, don't do this. But as a state agency to like kind of, that's a gap we can't quite bridge on, like, we're the government, we're gonna tell everybody.
Educate.
It's educate, yeah, we kind of, like, Penn State Extension does programs, they're the ones who kind of do that, we help them facilitate those and they help us. But usually that stuff goes through more of like the extension services, not like us as a government agency. Penn State Extension does a lot of classes for arborists, short courses, for landscaping, like they're the ones who do it. And they do have quite a bit, it's just state's really big. And there's everybody and their uncle pops up with a landscaping business, and you just make a business number and you mow people's yards and you start progressing from there. And they have to want to learn too. That's a big thing. And, you know, tree tenders courses, we get landscapers to do tree tenders so they can learn more. So it's really hard as a government agency for us to do that, but we facilitate and help Penn State Extension do those courses with funding and things like that. So, yeah, no problem.
Thank you for the presentation. Will you be posting the slides on the website?
I think they've recorded it, so
Yes.
hi.
Thank you.
All right. I've
All right.
talked for quite a while, so.
Thank you.
All right. All right.
So, a couple things in the back there, we have some handouts, which has a list of the certified arborists within 10 miles of Buckingham. And there's a handout from Penn State on how to mulch a tree. Our next speaker, Dominic, who is from Bartlett Tree Experts. He is a certified arborist, and he's going to talk to us about and it's a disease that is impacting our beech trees. One that we have lots of beeches here in Buckingham Township, and I'm sure you're all interested in learning about this new disease. So, Dominic.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dominic Zamaro. I'm a certified arborist and licensed pesticide applicator in the state of Pennsylvania. Currently, I work for Bartlett Tree Experts, and I manage the Dublin office. I know some of you guys in here, but not everybody, so it's nice to meet you all. Today, I'm going to be going over some beech leaf disease basics. But I wanted to say, firstly, thank you guys very much for having me out. It's kind of like a visual representation of what you guys seem to be all about, speaking and caring for the trees. So thank you.
Dominic, I'm
Yes.
having a little bit of trouble hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that, sorry, but
So, just going over, some basic beech basics. The native range of the beech tree you can see is from, southeastern Canada all the way down into parts of Florida, and there's a couple little spots in Mexico. I'm sure they're pretty cool down there. But, that's the, for, the American beech, that is. Beech is a, really unique, tree because there's about 10 species in the entire world, whereas oaks have 300 to 600. So it's really important that we protect all trees, but the beech trees are super vulnerable. Quick facts, they're long-lived, shade-tolerant trees. They provide food to the local squirrels and deer and other things. And it takes about 40 years for them to produce seeds. So they take a really long time to grow and mature. That's their range throughout the world. So you can see American beech in the eastern part of the United States down into Mexico, and then you have European beech, Oriental beech, and then two types of beech in Japan, and a handful of them in Southeast Asia. Just in case nobody knows what a beech tree looks like, that's totally possible. You can tell by their bark, amongst other things, but they have the grayish silverish bark, and that's kind of what they look like. So buds, flowers, and fruit, there is a pretty good representation of the flowers down there, and then you have some immature fruit and some fruit that is overripe, and the buds. The leaves, if you're going down the road maybe a month ago when the world was covered in snow and ice and it felt like the second ice age, you might have seen something called marcescence. It's when they hold on to their leaves. Nobody really knows why they do that. Some people think it's to protect the immature buds. But there is an example of European beech foliage right next to the American beech. American beech is on the left. That's what is endemic to here. And the roots are pretty crazy. They can form pretty crazy root plates and have really interesting structure. They're pretty particularly beautiful. They're one of my favorite trees. So to know your enemy, you must become your enemy. But I don't expect any of you guys to become nematodes. So we're gonna talk about what is beech leaf disease. So that's a really long name for a really tiny nematode or roundworm. I can't even begin to pronounce it. I could try, but for all intents and purposes tonight, we'll call it the beech leaf disease nematode. So we'll keep it simple. Where did it come from? It's something that came from Japan, and on Japanese beech, it creates galls or blisters on the foliage, but there's not really any mortality. There's no really reported mortality, probably because they've grown to coexist, and Japanese beech have a natural tolerance to it. This is a disease map, so you can see right down there. Here, I'm going to move up front real quick. Right down here along Lake Erie in Ohio, everybody's favorite state. That's where the first documented cases of BLD were in 2012, and this map only goes to 2023. So I'd imagine it's continuing to spread outwards. We can see, in Bucks County, it looks like it was 2021 or 2022, the first recorded instance of BLD was here. How do we look out for it, right? So you can see, when it's a, early damage or an early infestation of the nematode, it kind of looks like that. You can see dark banding in the margins of the veins of the leaf, best seen from below. So if you pick a leaf off your beech tree and look at it through, like if you're looking through a kaleidoscope, almost, maybe not so close to your face, you'll see all that dark banding. And depending on disease pressure, it can be mild at first and the symptoms can increase over the course of a number of years. And that's where things really start to get bad. So the late stage damage, you can see extreme leaf distortion, fluorosis, leaf crinkling, and after 2 or 3 years of banding, sometimes you can see a thickening of the leaf tissue. It's pretty nasty stuff. And then towards the end of the road, necrosis, chlorotic banding from lack of nutrients and resources. The dark banding gets even darker and is more apparent, and some leaves will come out stunted because there's not really enough there to make full and healthy leaves. So this is a microscope photo. I think this is really cool. You ever see like this is your brain on drugs and it's like a fried egg? So this is your tree on beech leaf disease nematode. So the left is what a healthy leaf looks like, and you can see on the right there, that is a BLD positive sample, and it just deforms the whole inside of the leaf to make it harder for the trees to photosynthesize and be able to feed themselves. That's really kind of what we're dealing with. It's something where the trees will essentially starve to death. They'll deplete their energy reserves. They won't be able to produce new healthy foliage, and for all weights and measures, in layman's terms, starve to death. So a normal tree, it photosynthesizes, it invests its resources, all its carbohydrate stores and things like that from the roots into making new leaves. So it has a net gain or of resources or energy, so it can push out new healthy leaves the next year. With a BLD infested tree, it requires more energy and more energy investment. The photosynthetic rate, so the ability for those leaves to actually make energy for the tree, are much lower, and then it gradually, basically, it starts at that. So gradual depletion of carbon and energy stores, poor growth, dieback, things like that. This is an example of a chlorotic flush, a second flush of leaves on a European beech tree after it shed some diseased leaves, and you can see that it doesn't really have the nutrient resources to really make super duper chlorophyll to photosynthesize. So the tree will usually drop BLD leaves when they're bad enough they can't fulfill their part of the program, and then flush out with that. Sustainable? No, not really. So the nematodes, all stages are in the bud in the winter. That's where they overwinter. In the springtime, the leaves emerge with symptoms, mostly juvenile nematodes and eggs remain in the leaves where they mature and continue to reproduce through the early summer, and then late summer and the fall, they'll migrate back into that bud tissue to start their little cycle all over again. So this is just like a little infographic here that has too many arrows. So spring and summer, you observe the symptoms. That's that one down the bottom left. Females, juveniles, eggs in the buds over the dormant season, and late summer and fall, they scurry down and back into the buds. So what do we know about the spread of it so far? To tell you the truth, not much. There are theories. So local spread is likely by wind-driven rain, birds, squirrels, gravity. They're very, very, very small. The nematodes are impossible to see with the naked eye. They can be theoretically held in like a drop of rain. Far distance spread theory. movement of birds, like migratory birds, are spreading some of this. And things that are feeding on buds and insects and things like that. European beech, maybe introduction of non-native beech species in the United States and through the nursery trade, maybe that could vector it, but there's no real hard science quite yet on how it's really spreading. So what do we do about it? That's the big question, right? This is broad form. It's made by Bayer. It is a fungicide that was also relabeled as an nematicide. It has nematicidal properties. This is something that's generally not available to the public. To apply, you probably need a applicator's license. There is a foliar spray program for trees that are generally less than 10 inches in diameter breast height. That's about 54 inches off the ground a year. And we've seen pretty good results with it. So-
How far, what if, do the trees get too far gone and dry form and help it?
There's definitely a point of no return. So, just because the leaf mass on a tree, all that foliar mass, that's what's responsible for making all the food, if you will, for the tree. So imagine if you ate, a tree having less than 60% of its leaves is a distinct disadvantage. So maybe like if you were on a severely reduced calorie diet for an extended period of time, it's something that it might be able to peter on for a little bit, but it's not something that's really sustainable. So on the left, we have untreated, and on the right, we have treated with broad form. So that was from a test site on Long Island.
Was that a tree that was infected or that was used for them?
So that I'm actually not sure. That's a good question. But prophylactically, definitely recommended if you live in this area. I mean, prophylactic treatment if you want to keep your trees as healthy as possible.
And that's a foliar spray, not an injection.
So we're gonna.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'll say there is an injection, but generally speaking, for small trees and trees less than 10 inches in diameter, depending on the site, there's the broad form works really well. So this is actually treated versus controlled trees. Can you guess which ones are treated and which ones are the control? And it kind of goes to show there is effective management because the proximity at which they're planted is it's a pretty cool picture.
Yeah.
So surprised. And again, this is another example with broad form, but timing and full leaf coverage are pretty critical to success. If we're not hitting it at the right time of year, if the applicators don't get full leaf coverage, you're going to see suboptimal results. So that's why I say, in certain places it's probably smarter to do the injections, depending.
Just a quick question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this a once and done, or is this like every year you're gonna need to treat the?
No, unfortunately, there's no cure, there's no magic bullet. So this is something that would have to happen in perpetuity, more or less, until something better comes.
How is blood form applied?
It's a foliar spray.
It's sprayed?
Yes, it's sprayed on the foliage of the tree. And it's translaminar, which means it's able to move through the leaf surface and kill the nematodes inside the leaves.
So I've heard that there's drenching around some trees.
There currently is no effective systemic soil treatment. There are things that you can do to help, but it's not a direct treatment for beech leaf disease. So the soil, like the systemic soil drench you're probably thinking of is probably a phosphite treatment, which is definitely a good thing to do. It's part of the best recommended practices, doing a phosphite soil treatment. It's more of an induction compound. So it's like if anybody here flies or has taken like an airborne, like a zinc pill or something like that to help increase your immune system, that's the most analogous thing that I can equate it to. It's definitely a good thing, and it's highly recommended that you do that, but it's not a direct treatment for beech leaf disease. So here we go, next stop, injections, beach chemotherapy, if you will. It's more of like a blood transfusion, I think, but, so basically this is a macro injection, meaning instead of, are you guys familiar with ash borer? Sure, you guys all live around here, I'm sure you're more than familiar. Ash borer injections are measured in milliliters, these are measured in gallons of material. It's a little bit more of an arduous and finicky process than a micro injection that you would do for emerald ash borer. It's Arbortech 20S, that's the product that we use. It's been, Matt Warden, Bartlett Research Laboratories, he developed this treatment. He didn't develop the chemical, but the chemical's been around for a very long time, since I think like the late 70s. But he's done a lot of work and research to have it relabeled, if you will, as also as an nematocide. So it has nematocidal properties and it works very well on the injection, macro injection level. So I'm sorry, you want me to go back?
Yeah.
We were trying to take a picture of that.
How do you get back to it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is Arbortech Trail in Hillsborough Township, New Jersey. It's an area where there was a pretty clearly defined trail in between two alleys of beech trees. And on the left, you can see the untreated trees, and on the right, you can see the treated trees. Treated trees do still show some banding, but currently it's about less than 5% of the foliar density of the tree is affected, which is something that's super tolerable to trees, and it works really well.
This is a once a year treatment at the beginning of the season, or?
So it's a once every 2 year treatment. Currently, research is still out and might be able to get pushed to 3 years, but right now, every 2 years is the best practice. It's once you hit full leaf expansion. So once the trees are transpirating and starting to pull things up, that's basically what we're doing. We're trying to hit it as early as possible. Generally, we're starting in mid-May, and the cutoff, generally speaking, is late July. Past that, you can still do it, but I always tell clients and other people that you're probably not going to see optimal results if you do it any later than if you do it any earlier. It's most likely not going to uptake well. So treated trees versus untreated trees again. You can see on the left, there's a lot of banding. This is the early stages. And then on the right, you can still see some banding. Does anybody see where the banding is? Over on the right. I'll say there's plenty of banding over on the left and on the right in the treated tree. There is still some banding, but it's very minimal. So the most noticeable one that I can see is right here, but that's extremely minimal. And I would say that the injections are a pretty good method of control. Yes.
We have 11 big beeches in our front yard, and they don't even, last year, the leaves didn't even come full, they were tiny little, I mean, you could see through to the sky, it was just sad. So they aren't even this good, is that like?
Probably. Yes.
So you said the foliar spray is usually used on 10 inches or smaller diameter, and the injection would be for larger trees?
Yeah.
And that is it about the same success rate?
Yeah, for the most part. I would say that the broad form has a slightly higher success rate,
Okay,
but it all depends on, like, there's a lot of gap for human error. So like you don't achieve full coverage,
right.
and things like that. So the applicators have to be really thorough.
So
And
it's the practicality of not being able to get all the leaves on the bigger trees.
absolutely.
Okay.
Is there a limit on the size that you can treat with the injection?
No.
No.
There's a minimum size, but I mean, hypothetically, there's no maximum. So where does this leave us, right? It's a value judgment, similarly to how she was saying about if you wanted us to come and use an air spade and blow out all the root flares in your trees, it's a value judgment. It's at this point, it's extremely cost prohibitive and impractical to be able to save large forests of beech. Bartlett is doing work with the Pennypack Trust and other organizations, using them as test sites and trying to preserve some of their forests. But on a grand scale, the prognosis isn't super great. At a homeowner level, something that I advise people doing is picking a couple good health specimens in good health that you might want to preserve if that's what you want to do, and having those treated. Otherwise, I would say remove them if they could become hazardous or otherwise. So the prognosis isn't good, but for specimen beach preservation, we have a lot of tools at our disposal, and it seems like it's working well.
So this foliar spray is also only applied by arborists, not by individual
Licensed applicators.
license app. I mean, just because when I first heard of them, it was, the only treatment was this IV, confusion. But there's so many small trees growing in our farm, wooded areas, and you would think that you could just spray them in little ones, that you could just spray down, but that has to be brought in by a licensed person.
Yeah, and there's certain restrictions on the label. So when you're applying any kind of pesticide, the label's the law. So depending on the amount of acres, the amount of volume you're able to dispense a year, it's just not something that's practical. And then at the same point, all those tiny little beech trees that you see in the woods, they're going to take a really, 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 really long time to mature. And it's kind of a fool's gambit at that point.
Do you see much vascular damage from using the macro injections?
No. So the main problem that we're running into using the macro injections is just basically a mechanical misapplication issue. So we found that injecting on the sides of the exposed roots actually promotes better tissue healing and better sealing and rather than going from the top. Going from the top isn't advisable, but there's no really vascular damage or otherwise.
So you said that this is native to Japan and that the Japanese beech trees seem to be immune to it, they've adapted.
Not necessarily immune, but resistant to a certain extent.
Okay, so I assume someone's doing research on why that is and what the properties are. Do you know if anyone's working on a hybrid that between the American and the Japanese beech that might be resistant?
I'm sure they are, but I'm not aware of it. So the best things you guys can do as homeowners and as stewards of your own properties is if you have beech trees, the best thing to do would be to keep your trees vigorous and healthy. Proper cultural practices, good pruning if necessary, proper mulching, just the best environment that you can put your tree in to give it the best chance of success. Phosphate treatments, like I said, they're recommended. I know Davey and Cleveland Metro Parks are doing a lot of research into phosphate treatments, but I have to emphasize phosphate treatments alone are not a treatment for beech leaf disease. They're definitely something that is good to do and something I would recommend, but they are not a treatment alone. And to review, so post-infection, I recommend doing things prophylactically. It's something that in American beech, if you're not treating your trees and it's in your tree, there is a 100% mortality rate. I haven't seen any American beeches that are resistant to it by any stretch. So less than 10 inches, mainly, foliar program is super effective, works awesome. And post-infection on larger trees, a injection program. So it'd be once every 2 years.
What are you charging for that now? What's the treatment? Roughly.
So it really depends, but with the injections, it's measured out at about $38 per inch.
Per inch diameter.
Correct. Yes, it's something where it's one of the only treatments that we can't control how quickly it goes. We're basically just a vector for the product to get to the tree, and the tree's vascular system does the rest. So, the fastest I've ever seen one done in Bucks County is about 45 minutes. And the longest it's ever taken is 8 hours, at least on our end. We've seen there's other people that have taken like 9 hours, 10 hours. It's a whole day. So it's like kind of like a strap in and grab a book kind of thing. It's highly variable. Depends on the health of the tree, the cultural conditions it's in, if it's raining. Some people think it depends on the weather. There's a lot of different factors that play into it. It's hard to say.
Should we put that last slide up?
Yes. Yes.
I've had a tree where probably like 80, 100 feet tall, and it lost, I guess, 20% last summer, just snapped and fell down. That tree, you saw it.
Mhm.
What are the odds of it surviving if I treat it every 2 years with this? Or is it past no return? Like, how do you determine which trees have a chance and which don't?
So the things that we're looking for are trees that are otherwise fairly healthy. A tree with beech leaf disease in the early stages could be otherwise fairly healthy and in good condition. Your tree did lose a lot of canopy. You said like about 20%.
Yeah.
If the rest of the canopy is still there and it still uptakes treatment, the treatment will work. But again, there's a lot of things, just like people, there's a lot of things that factor into why trees decline and die. So it's like, if somebody goes in to receive cancer treatment and their buddy goes in to receive treatment for the same exact cancer, the results could vary, but they've been pretty consistent.
Thank you.
Are you or your people pretty good, when you look at the tree of diagnosing, triaging the tree and saying whether it's likely to be treatable or not?
Yeah, certainly so. I mean, if I saw a tree that was too far gone, it would be dishonest and unethical of me to say, yes, we can treat this tree. I wouldn't want that to be done to me at my own house, so I wouldn't.
You
do
did
that.
tell us that about one of the trees near our house. Which
Yeah.
belongs to the community, but.
That's so sad.
But mostly it's a firstly a value judgment on your part, and then is it, having a certified arborist like myself or one of the many others in the pamphlet back there come out and tell you if it's worth it or not.
What would you recommend to plant as a replacement?
Perodia persicum, so like Persian parodias, like there's a million different species that you could plant, but nothing is really, the beach is so narrow, there's nothing like a beach.
That's
the truth.
What comes close?
There's nothing like a beach.
Nothing really.
And if someone,
I will just say as far as the state version of all of this, like we are inventorying the beach we have on our state land and picking areas that have relatively healthy beach and planning in the future, if they stay that way, once we like more research and stuff comes out, treating those beach on public property. We've done that with the ash. I treat ash every year still. So like as a state effort on public property, like we do treatments in areas where we have a healthy ash, or in this case, beach population that we feel that we can treat. Cause I am a certified applicator, so like we treat on our own properties too. And we've done controls and everything at Nolde Forest for the phosphite and things like that. So we've been doing in-house research on different things too. So on a state level with state property, like we're also aware and doing what we can for populations to at least see if we can keep them for, the future for at least seed production and things like that. Cause we do collect our own seed on state forest and have a state nursery, so. I don't know if it's helpful, but we do it on state property, so.
What's the expectation of the species survival? Do you
Uh,
think it's 0?
I mean, unless they're treated, it's pretty grim prognosis.
But even treated trees, do you think the nematodes will adapt, or do you think they'll?
So there's been some research done on this, and there's a very low likelihood for development of resistance. It was classified extremely low. So in terms of resistance to the treatments that are currently available, extremely low likelihood of resistance.
So the focus has to be on the nematode itself and how to prevent it from affecting the trees in the future.
Yeah, I suppose so. But it's one of those things where, if, you walk through the door, you can't really go back,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Sorry to hear.
Yeah, it's here.
All right, well, thank you so much.
I got a question for the township, or township property, are you doing anything that you're talking about?
We did a quick survey and didn't find many beaches actually on township-owned property. And they tended to be in good shape this past year.
What are you gonna treat them preventatively?
We'll monitor if they get infected
Property.
and then treat
That
them.
you may be willing to let us come into and.
All right.